Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing selling high-value B2B services. And whether you're already selling high-value B2B services and need, sort of to refine and optimize your process, or you're simply unsure where to start and are fearful that changing your business model will see existing clients sort of bolt for the door, then this episode is well worth the investment of your time. Looking and over my sort of 25 year sort of career, I've been in sort of both the budget end and the sort of premium end. And I understand it's certainly a different position that you're going to need. The ability to sort of be recognized for the value that you provide instead of just trading time for money is a crucial strategy and a mindset shift you need to make when building up your high value service range. So just, I suppose, thinking about it for the listeners, knowing how to position your sales strategy, your process, your execution skills, and sort of other sort of crucial elements, it really is a shift towards selling higher value B2B services. We're going to cover these topics plus much, much more in today's session of the Open Mic. And I'm extremely privileged to welcome to the show an amazing entrepreneur, an international speaker, one who is very much respected as a professional in the field. So a big Open Mic welcome to Kim Orlesky from KO Advantage Group based in Calgary, Canada. Hey, welcome to the show, Kim. It's great to have you on here.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. I am thrilled to be here and to share all of my knowledge as much as I possibly can in our short period of time with all your listeners.
Oh, it's brilliant. And as I say, I'm super, super privileged. I mean, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. And for the ones listening, and obviously those on the YouTube, you can obviously check out and find out more about Kim and what she does and her team at KO Advantage by visiting kimorlesky.com. That's ORLESKY. So kimorlesky.com. And you can also check her out on LinkedIn and at Twitter at Kim Orlesky. So we're going to do that. And there's also another link that I've got for you that I'm going to share with you with some resources that Kim's kindly agreed to offer our listeners. So I'll cover those later on in the show. But a little bit about Kim, just to demonstrate the pedigree that we've got on the show today. And I said I'm humbled and I'm privileged. Kim's pedigree as a serial entrepreneur is quite exceptional. Kim's been voted Success Magazine's most inspirational bloggers in 2015, Female Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017 by Startup in Canada, named one of the most influential sales leaders by Lead Views. Kim is also the author of 2 books that you can search and buy on Amazon, which is How to Be a Nomad and Finding Myself, Love, One Girl's Journey Across 17 Countries in 4 continents in 6 months. Kim has spent almost a decade working for some of the most successful Fortune 500 companies and has sold to entrepreneurs, business owners, C-levels, international conglomerates. I had the privilege of witnessing Kim speak at the Inbound conference, at the HubSpot Inbound conference, and a real powerful session that she did there as well. And I hope I've got most of that, Kim, for you.
I do. I feel like you did a little bit of espionage even before. I don't think that was actually all in my bio.
No. It's, we stalk you all the time, don't worry. Legitimately, of course. But in your own words, Kim, for the listeners, and because we're going to be speaking about high-value B2B services, one thing that I will say, and if you're unsure about who to follow, the people that we attract to the show are usually at the pinnacle, at the highest possible level. So people like Kim are serial winners. As I mentioned earlier, you can get an amazing resource that Kim's kindly put up there. If you visit kimorlesky.com, so that's KIMORLESKY.com/webinar-series, there's a 4-part sort of video series that Kim will drip out to you over a few days. And it's really going to help you sort of position yourself into sort of, getting started with high price sort of services. We'll put those links below in the podcast on the app and on the YouTube channel. If you have got any questions for us, you can shoot us a message using the hashtag #TheOpenMic or search Kim out on LinkedIn. I'm sure she'll be more than happy, or Twitter, to get those questions answered for you. What we will do from there is, Kim, in your own words, I always like you to put some color on it because I never think that I do our guests justice, and I'm so privileged at the time that you've given us. So in your own words, tell us a little about your career, the highs, the lows, where you've hit the wall, where you've been successful. Over to you, and really looking forward to this.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So before we even started the show, Mike was telling me about a 36-minute introduction, and I don't know if I can beat that, but I might have to challenge.
Henry Kaminsky Jr. from The Brand Doctor was 36 minutes. The story was so powerful. I just let it run, but as little time as you need, Kim.
Yeah. I mean, and I talk a lot about this from stage, right? I mean, I never thought I was going to be a salesperson. It was something that, I kind of fell into after I graduated university. I thought I was going to sit in front of business analytics, and I had just finished reading Rich Dad Poor Dad's Robert Kiyosaki, and he talked all about how the Xerox and learning how to sell really gave him the starting platform to become the self-made millionaire that he really. And I have my own arguments about self-made millionaires.
Yeah, there's a debate around that.
Yeah. But I mean, at the time, I mean, I was 20, 21, 22, 23, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, Robert Kiyosaki is a millionaire, right? Just follow the footsteps of those that have done it, right? I mean, I think that's a great piece of advice no matter where we are in business, right? Find someone who's done it and then just follow exactly the same process that they've done it themselves. And so I ended up taking a job with Xerox, and very quickly that was my little analytical brain that typically runs, because I was so financially driven and financially minded. I was like, sales is a process. Sales isn't this art that we thought it was. It's not this enigma. It's not this, veil of mystery. It's actually, just a step-by-step approach. And, loving math as much as I did, I love this because you know that you're getting the answer every single time. And so I worked for Xerox for several years. I ended up leaving there. I worked for American Express. I worked for a large Canadian logistics company for a short period of time. And I even had a stint in medical device sales, which is a completely different animals. Yeah.
Right. Aside, because, and certainly in the UK, when you talk about Xerox and you think copiers and that sort of business equipment machine salesperson sort of mentality is very driven and processed, isn't it, through that?
We like, I mean, if you want to talk about, I mean, car salesmen and copier salesmen are your iconic salespeople, right? Like it's a hustle, grind. And here's the thing is that, yes, there's a little bit of an art to the sell, but the art really is the finesse. It's the refinement between a process that already works. Yeah. But sales is a numbers game. Right? You do the work, you get the results. And I've seen terrible salespeople, but they will get the results every time because all they do is just, call this many prospects, have this many meetings. And it's just, if you do it enough, probability says that you're going to get there. So I followed the process and everything, and around, became, sales rep of the year after year, right? Because I knew the process. And around 2014, I had this moment where I was like, I don't really know if this is the life that I want to live anymore. I don't know if I want to be a name on a Post-it note that gets moved around up some corporate ladder, somebody else predetermining. And I didn't know if, sales was something that I still wanted to do, or if it was something that I had developed my entire life around by coincidence and not by design. And so I asked myself, a really deep question. I said, what do I really want to do with my life? And the only answer that really came up to me was, go travel. Yeah. It was something that I hadn't really experienced. It was something that I had done a 2-week vacation here, another week here, but significant travel was where my heart was calling. And so I quit my job. I sold my house, and by myself, I went backpacking 17 countries on 4 different continents, everywhere from Australia to Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa. And I tell an amazing story about hiking Kilimanjaro from stage because it really correlates with the idea of this entrepreneurial journey that, we have to continue going, and, we might think we have it all figured out, but we'll always if we have the right guides in front of us, we can get to our destination, because it might be easy at the very beginning, or so we think, right? Because we're busy, developing websites and logos and all this other things that as entrepreneurs, we think we need to have before we have the initial sales conversation. And what I end up telling a lot of my students is sell it first, create it later. Get somebody to be bought into the idea of what you're creating for them, because it's a lot easier to build that website and that logo and that freebie on your website when you already have revenue coming through.
Yeah, and it puts that accountability to deliver and stop thinking about it and execute, doesn't it?
Oh, I mean, you know, the number of passionate entrepreneurs that I unfortunately meet in my entire lifetime, where they started a business and 6 months to a year later, they have decided to go back to work.
Yeah.
Right, is it breaks my heart, because we sometimes people think that we live in this field of dreams, right? If I build it, they will come. And just because you have a really pretty website does not mean that you've connected that conversation. And
Yeah.
this is where, I mean, this is where your marketing people are like, you know, shaking your head, right? This is the overlap between sales and marketing. It's, you know, your client is, you know, go deliver it to them, bring more clients in.
Yeah.
You know, don't just try to build so many leads that you don't actually know how to have the conversation with. And so this is why I specifically focus on high value sales, as opposed to anything else. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So when I came back from my trip, I asked myself, I'm like, wow, I'm like, my heart is full. You know, where do I want to take this next? And that was when it came to me that it wasn't about sales that I didn't like. I actually really liked sales. I just didn't want to do it for any large companies anymore. And I thought, you know, as I was traveling and I was seeing, you know, these families that were, you know, living hand to mouth type of thing, they would go out and sell what they had, all the goods they had, and that was enough to feed their family. I'm like, we have people here that are doing this, and they just don't know how to have that conversation beyond, because selling a service is a lot different than selling a product. When somebody's holding on to, yeah, when you're holding onto a shirt, you're holding onto a mug, you're like, okay, this is the value of this. Even a house, right? You're like, you walk into a house and you're like, you know, you look at the finishing and you're like, this is the value that I've arbitrarily given this house, but there's a value to it because you can touch it. When we're selling a service, whether that is a website, whether that's business consulting, architectural design, engineering drawings, whatever it is, and you know, we'll probably later on, we'll talk about how almost every product should also be a service, ideally. You need to be able to have that conversation. And my sales experience really focused along on that. So now today, we've created one of the fastest growing entrepreneurial sales schools that helps, we guarantee our results, where we actually deliver people the sales process. We go on application, not education, because, you know, the number of books that we've read, the number of courses, the number of webinars we've sat through, how much of that are we literally applying every single day? Whereas we decided that we were going to really focus this on the entrepreneur who's way too busy. We were going to focus it on the idea that, you know, we need to learn a little bit, and we then go and apply it, and we see, okay, does that work? Does it stick? Because our memories are based on experience, not on things that we've been told. And it's been an amazing journey. And now, like I said, you know, I'm speaking on stage. I'm currently writing my third book, which is actually going to be sales focused. It's not travel focused. Wow, go figure. But that should be out. That will be out by January 1st.
Oh, fabulous. And have we got a title for that, or is that under wraps still?
We do have a title for it. So it's Sell More Faster, creating premium products at a premium price, or creating premium services at the premium price. I can't remember the exact subtitle, but the whole idea is, you know, how do we go through that sales cycle entirely?
And that'll be available to pre-order, I would imagine, soon, would it? Or?
It will be, yeah. So pre-orders will be taken starting in November. So
and they'll do that on kimorlesky.com.
Yeah. Thank you.
Look out for that for sure. Absolutely. Well, that's an amazing journey. And the traveling, you get so much experience. One of our lead copywriters, Gary Spinks, is one of our direct response copywriters. He actually did a trek through Iran. This is early 80s. So you got to think about, you know, the date time. He finished college, came out early 80s, went through Iran, a very difficult sort of country politically in that sort of period, all through Asia. He did the mountains, the Everest stuff, and just amazing sort of journey. And, you know, when the first time I met Gary, I actually met him at York train station, and I said, just give us your backstory, because I'm really fascinated about people's backstories. And then he started telling me about his journey. Like 2.5 hours later there, we're still on Gary's journey through Iran and the communists in Russia and all this sort of stuff. And it's amazing. So the experiences. What was your favorite country, Kim, if you don't mind?
Oh, Mike, that's such a loaded question, right? I mean, everything was like, is the most amazing part about doing the entire journey in 6 months is seeing the juxtaposition with cultures in such a short period of time. I would move to Australia in a heartbeat if it was feasible.
Yeah.
I have, especially, you know, we were just talking about the snowstorm that's going out here right now. I would,
Yeah.
who doesn't want to be on the beaches of Sydney? Vietnam actually was
Wow.
surprisingly one of my absolute, the beaches were fantastic. The
Amazing.
people were lovely. The food was amazing. Everyone there is just in love with love. And that was, I mean, I think almost every single store had either Michael Bublé or Celine Dion playing. Because they love love. And
Yeah.
it's hard to not get caught up in that.
Up in that, yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that. Apologies for the low ball question there, but I always have to ask and get you to put you on a position. In sales, be decisive. My old non-exec Bill McGrath, when I was a chief executive of a PLC, like a publicly traded company, and he was like a serial FTSE 100 sort of guy, and he always used to say to me, Mike, as long as you do your research, a bad decision is worse than indecision. Indecision will kill you. I mean, so I always try and get people to put people on the spot there, and it sort of sticks with me. So I'll pass that off to Bill in fairness. But Kim, thanks ever so much. I really appreciate you sharing your journey.
Yes.
Seriously impressive resume as well. And as I said earlier, for you guys if you're listening in the car on the podcast app or whatever, you can visit kimorlesky.com. That's KIMORLESKY.com. And if you want to access that free 4-part video training series, you can do that at kimorlesky.com/webinar-series. But I will put the link below, and you'll be able to get that there. And I'd highly recommend that you check that out. It's a great little course. For those listening and are serious about selling high-value B2B services, this podcast is going to be your track that you're going to need to hone your skills. And again, we sincerely appreciate you sharing your expertise today, Kim. So let's buckle up and get started. So when we look at high value B2B services, sort of, I suppose it starts with the importance of creating value in sales meetings. Kim, could you just share us your thoughts around that, please?
Yeah. And I mean, we talk a lot about, this whole value-based selling in high value. And it's like, okay, well, how do we create this? And the irony is that a lot of people think that when they're selling, we spend more time talking, right? What do I say? What do I say? I actually had a couple of gentlemen, they had their own engineering firm, and they came in, they're like, Kim, we want to hire you. You need to come in and be our closer, right? They said, we've done 99% of the work. We're like, we need you to do the last one, which is the close. And I'm like, and I thought to myself, I'm like, well, that's not really the last 1%. That's the 100%.
Why did we not get that?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have the close, you don't have anything. But it's not about the close. It's about everything. The close happens from the very first interaction that we're with our client. And when we're in high value sales, the idea is that we actually spend a lot more time asking questions, listening to the client, reiterating what we've just heard, and becoming more collaborative than we are, this is how it has to be, Mr. or Mrs. Customer. And we slow down that process. I mean, if you've ever gone ahead and bought like a luxury item, purchasing a Bentley, I imagine is, one day, right? But I mean, purchasing a Bentley would be a completely different experience than purchasing a Fiat. I mean, you go in, the person's like, here's the Fiats, go in, take a look at that. I mean, you go in, you purchase a Bentley, they are wining and dining you, like literally, like they will actually like, do you want a wine? Do you want a scotch? Do you, and they talk to you and they're going through this really slow process, and it's very methodical. And, whenever we're talking about high value services, I tell my students every time, I said, I would much rather you spend an extra hour meeting with your client, knowing you're going to get the deal, than trying to rush to the proposal stage. So when we're creating value, it's less about what we tell the client and more about what we're asking them. So to challenge their current way of thinking, to make them see the bigger picture, to understand the goals and the aspirations and those ambitions that they want to achieve, and then positioning ourselves as a way of being able to help them get there, as opposed to the old way of selling, selling, which was this challenger model, was what's your problem? Let me fix it. Yeah.
So outdated, isn't it? Today?
Well, and it worked at the time because that was before the days that Google had really taken off.
Yeah.
We didn't have access to, this whole idea of WebMD, right? When you have like a rash on you, you just go to WebMD and you're like, here's my symptoms, and it gives you this 17-page printout, and you take it to the doctor and you're like, doctor, I have tuberculosis, right? Like, this is what it says. And the doctor, if the doctor was ridiculous, they would say, yep, not a problem. And they write you a prescription. We're not there. Any doctor that wants to keep their medical license is likely going to say, okay, I get it, but let's take a step back. Let's understand what's going on. If you are a high value service provider, take a step back with your clients and understand the one thing that they can't find on Google is, how do I get to my goal faster? They're looking to fix their problem that they currently have. And there's WikiHow, right? They have created a whole business just in WikiHow. Yeah. If there's a problem, they know how to fix it. That's not a problem. But what we want to align ourselves with is people that are going to help raise the tide. The raising tide raises all the ships. And we want to make sure that this is why the whole idea of raving tribe, connecting with people that are with you to grow your business is so much more relevant now, because we want to create those collaborations to help us get there faster.
Absolutely. And I think also, this is just slightly off script, and thanks for sharing that, Kim. That's awesome. I think from my own experiences, because we do have a high ticket end and we've got a sort of a medium ticket end, we don't really play in the lower end of the markets these days. But I always think it's about how you set yourself up and how you set yourself out. It's a bit like valuing your time. And, when people ring up and say, hey, Mike, I want to speak to you, you can't. You got to book an appointment through a calendar, and, and that'll be when I'm free. And people say, well, look, Mike, do you not want my business? And I will say to people, it's not that I don't want your business. It's just that I cannot, if I'm in the middle of something, just take a call and give you my full attention. For me, if I've got you blocked out for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, I can focus and sit down and work with you. And, I've not got any other distraction. My phone's off, my email system's down, and I'm literally working on my CRM, making notes or my Evernote system. And you have got my 100% full attention. And that's how I sort of try and justify that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but, ultimately it's about how you position yourself if you're selling high value clients as well. I'm just not freely available like a shop, a retail store on the high street.
Well, absolutely. And they should respect that, because when they do become your client, wouldn't you demand that, from somebody that you're working with? Like, wouldn't you want to know that the person that you have hired to help you get to a certain result is like 100% focused on the task at hand when that task is happening? And if they don't respect it, this is where this is why one of the reasons when we're doing high value services, we actually ask ourselves, what is the value? Like, what are some of the things I value? And ensuring that we're aligning with people that value that same thing, right? We, one of the things that, eventually we get to is always the price objection, right? You're too expensive type of thing, right? Can you do cheaper? And I love to, the question I come back to them is like, what would you say if your clients asked you that? They say, oh, no, we never negotiate on price. I would say, that's fantastic. You and I agree on that value.
We're on the same page. Fabulous. That's great validation. Thanks, Kim. So, moving forward. So, how asking better questions leads to higher revenue solutions. You talked earlier in the last sort of session about that questioning, taking a step back and listening to the customer, and and listening and noting. So just sort of share us with your expertise and your thoughts, Kim, around how asking better questions leads to those higher revenue solutions.
Yeah, it's and it's the way we pose the question. When we're and a lot of people will say, what, Kim, I'm already asking a lot of questions, but it's not the questions that you're asking. It is the questions that you're asking. It's not the number of questions that you're asking. It's the way you're asking the questions, the way you formed the question. There's two different types of questions. There's closed-ended questions and there's open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are driven to get you a yes or no answer. They're not good or bad, right? They're used strategically, right? You ask closed-ended questions strategically when you are wanting a yes or no answer. But oftentimes we see people that will go ahead and they have their first meeting and they're like, have you ever worked with a marketing agency before? Do you know your budget, right? Are you going to be the final decision maker? These are terrible questions, because it's like, yes, I've worked with a marketing agency before. Yes, I know my budget. Yeah, I'll be the final decision maker. what
You've got
information?
nothing out of it, have you?
You got nothing out of it. You painted yourself in a corner, right? But you checked the boxes, tick, 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 tick. Fantastic. Here's a proposal for, 30,000 pounds. Right? Versus like, I don't understand why I'm paying this amount.
And there's no value, is there?
There's no value exchange. Whereas when we ask open-ended questions, especially in like probably about 80% of that initial sales cycle, this is where we really start to create with the client, right? Who else is going to be a part of this decision making?
Yeah.
This doesn't mean that you are discounting the decision maker if you're talking to them, because every decision maker, chances are, has an influencer that they're going to want to involve, right? They're going to want to talk to their teammates, right? I have veto power in my own company. I will be the ultimate person that decides whether we go forward or not, but I will never make a huge decision without running it by my entire team. What would this mean to your company when we achieve this? When we can align ourselves to, a potential revenue or profitability, it's a lot easier to justify a 30,000 pound investment when we are seeing that this is ultimately going to bring in, 100,000 pounds every quarter. It's like, okay, now I see what the return on investment is, right? Who else are you looking at? Why is that important? When would you like to be finished, right? This is one of my favorite questions to ask, because people will be like, when would you like to make this decision, right? Which is a terrible question, because when do you want to have that 10 pounds lost, right? When do you want to start working out? It's like, well, ideally I would have wanted to start working out yesterday, but yesterday's gone, right? Like,
there's a great gym. I'm a big student of Jim Rohn.
Okay, yes.
And I think I have every single book, audio, even CD and cassette, from the years gone by. And for those of you who don't know what a cassette is, put a message on there using the hashtag #TheOpenMic, and I'll post you a picture. In fact, I might even put a picture on it there of a cassette. But back to the Jim Rohn thing. When Jim he speaks heavily around when is the best time to start something. And, everybody says, oh, right, no. And he goes, no, 10 years ago is the best time to start something. But the next best thing to time, not tomorrow, today.
Yes.
So, you can't go back 10 years, of course. We don't have a time machine, quite obvious, but you can do it today. Don't put it off till tomorrow. Do it today, and that's when you want that result. So apologies for hijacking the agenda.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
It wouldn't be me, Kim, if I didn't mention a Jim Rohn or a Ziegler or
I'm okay to be lined with these greats.
And Napoleon Hill as well, which I sort of live and die by, I think. And, I'll take a picture of us. We have a wall of appreciation in our office in the agency. And it's all the greats where we've read books and done courses that seriously impacted us lives and moved us forward.
Yes.
So, and again, if anybody wants a picture of that, just shoot us a message using the hashtag #TheOpenMic, and we'll get that posted out for you.
And I'm glad you mentioned Zig Ziglar. Like that, we actually built our entire company culture around a Zig Ziglar quote, which is, you can have everything you want in life when you help enough people get what they want. And when we find that we are lost with a conversation with a client, or we're not really sure where we want to take it next, we go back to that phrase and we're like, okay, what are we going to help them get to? And that number one, that always becomes our North Star, and it's never failed us.
Yeah, and we've got one here. You were born to win, but to be a winner, you must plan to win, prepare to win, and expect to win. And that's on our wall of appreciation by nice. Zig. Yeah, so we've got that there. So that's awesome. And thanks for sharing that with us, Kim. So why is it important to use storytelling to sway and move a sales conversation, I suppose, is the next subject we're going to discuss? Because you mentioned earlier that just asking yes, no, well, open, no, close questions. But, I always think about it when in my own personal life, take business out of it. People remember the stories when you went on holiday and somebody fell in the pool. Was that Ibiza, or was that, Menorca, or was that Florida? You don't always remember that. You remember him falling in the pool. It's that story behind it that drives that emotion. So why is it important to use storytelling to sway and move the sales conversation, Kim?
Yeah, well, I mean, storytelling has, it's one of those things since like the dawn of time that has been around, right? I mean, Aesop's fables, right? I mean, the reason why his messages resonated for so long was because it was always tied around a story. And even one of the best TED Talks of all time, it was done completely different. It's and I can't remember you'll have to find it out, but it was a gentleman about prison reform. And he changed the game, because when he came up for his TED Talk, you get 18 minutes for a TED Talk, and he spent the first 10 minutes telling a story about him and growing up with his grandmother and everything. And everyone was like, why are you spending all this time wasting your time? Like, you get 18 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's why it became the number one story. I know that everyone's going to be listening to this podcast, and there's probably going to be a few people that are going to take some notes. They're going to remember the travel story.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why when I'm on stage, I tell a Kilimanjaro story. They always remember the Kilimanjaro story, but they can't remember exactly what else that I've done, because we're emotionally motivating. In the sales cycle, we want to use stories strategically, right? We don't want to tell stories for the sake of stories.
Yeah.
We want to understand what is the point I want to make, and then tie the story around this, right? You know, Aesop's fable had the moral of the story, and then he tied an entire story around this. Yeah. We want to use specific stories to help sway our client or our prospect to make a decision faster, because when we tell it from the point of view of somebody else, they can picture it, right? It becomes much more real. Some of the stories that we like to tell is a story of somebody that took action immediately. We tell another story about a person that had regret, right? Oh, a regret story is fantastic. The person that either chose not to go forward, and where are they now? Which is always in a terrible situation. Yeah. Or the person that decided to underinvest, and then later on, Kay said, I wish I would have done it the right way the first time, even if it costs a little bit more money. Because then the client is going to be like, oh, I get it, right?
I don't want to be there.
I don't want to be there, right? This no longer becomes a logical decision for them. This becomes us actually affecting their hopes and dreams and aspirations.
Yeah.
And they may think, well, this might not apply to me, and that's fine, but it will stick and it will resonate with them. You want to tell stories about, why are you in the business that you are? People like working with those that we enjoy, right? One of the reasons why many people actually go with my sales course is not because we have an amazing sales process, which we do, by the way, right? We spend a lot of time, but because they're like, Kim, I loved your story. Yeah. I loved your story about entrepreneurship. I loved your story about, living your authentic self and helping those achieve more. Yeah. And that's why, when you think about the people you follow, the Jim Rohns, the Tony Robbins, the Napoleon Hills, the reasons why their books are so good is not because they're like, do this, right? They're like, here's how it affected me, and here's how it shaped me, and here's how it changed my ideology. And you're like, oh, I feel so connected to this person.
Absolutely.
So stories are fantastic.
And I agree totally. And for those, again, who are maybe a little bit younger than myself and Kim and don't understand the Aesop's fables, the one obvious one that comes out, which I think everybody will translate to, is The Boy Who Cried Wolf, which is an Aesop fable. And he stands at the top of a hill and shouts that the wolves come in for the sheep, and they kept running up to the top. And then they got there and he goes, oh, I'm only kidding. And then they came down and they kept doing it. And this kept going on and on and on. And then one day the wolf was actually there attacking the sheep, and he cried wolf, and all the villagers went, no, we're not going up there because he's not being truthful, and of course the loss of the flock. So that's a story that I got when I was a kid in the 70s, you know what I mean? And as I was growing up from there, and that still sticks with me. And I'm sure there's a whole host of
there's great ones. One of my personal favorite Aesop tales was the story about the gentleman walking around with the coat, and the wind and the sun were arguing, and they said, I bet I could probably make the person take off their coat faster. So the wind goes first, and he blows and he blows and blows, and like harder and harder and harder, and all the person does is like wraps themselves harder in the coat. And then the wind says, okay, I give up. Like, if I can't do it, nobody can do it. So then the sun goes ahead and he starts beaming hotter and hotter and hotter, and eventually the gentleman takes off his coat, with the moral of the story being, you can help people relax. Like, you can open people up by being warm to them, not by blowing cold air.
Yeah, and you get out, you get treat how you want to be treated yourself.
Yeah.
So no, that's an amazing way. So storytelling is pretty important. And for you guys who are interested in sort of storytelling in marketing, you want to check out another podcast I did with a guy called Rob Drummond. And he is a full podcast just on storytelling in marketing. There's some great little tips on there. I'm not quite sure what the episode number is, but you just search out the Open Mic with Rob Drummond. And there's some great storytelling examples in there just to sort of help you from a copywriter's perspective as well. So that's pretty cool. So Kim, how to build a scalable business model by focusing on 4 to 10 clients that will deliver 100% of your revenue is a killer question. And I'm so sort of keen to sort of tap into your knowledge base here. To help us understand that, how you can concentrate on a smaller number of customers, say 4 or 10, which will going to deliver all, 100% of what you're trying to achieve in forecast.
Well, and that should be the goal that you're ultimately going after, right?
Yeah.
When you think about, I mean, when we're getting into high value sales, we are moving away from the trading of time for money, and we're going back towards the results. And you can deliver greater results with a smaller number of people, right? This is Jerry Maguire, right? And then yet again, I'm probably going to age myself, right? But Jerry Maguire was all about, fewer clients, more personal attention.
Yeah.
He gave away everything to work with. Well, in his case was one, which I would never recommend, putting all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah. Too many.
Cuba Gooding Jr. was fantastic, but I think that was too risky of a move for Jerry. But I mean, the whole idea is that when you're setting up your goals, right? Every year you're doing your annual strategic planning. Look at what are the goals that we want to achieve, and how are we going to be able to get 80, 100% of our revenue?
Yeah.
Just by focusing on 4 to 10% or 4 to 10 clients.
Yeah.
Right. If you have one person taking over 10% of your revenue, I think that's pretty good, right? You ideally don't want 25, you'll end up building a little bit down, but at least that you have a business model that works. And for the amount of time that's going to take you, you can easily dedicate, one day a week to those 4 to 10
Perfect.
clients, so that you're spending the other 4 days really building it. Whatever that annual revenue you want to achieve is, right? Divide by the number of clients, no more than 10, no less than 4, and say, okay, so let's, just for ease of numbers, let's say you want to sell $100,000 in a year, right? You're a brand new entrepreneur. You're like, what, if I don't make at least $100,000, this isn't even worth it. Yeah. And, and you say, okay, for 4 clients, I need to create a solution that is going to be $25,000 or $10,000. Yeah. How do I create that? We become very narrow focused, and this is where your marketing team, right? And this is where sales and marketing overlap, right? What will get really narrow on what that ideal buyer persona is, right? What do they want to achieve? Who are we focusing on? And then we get laser focused.
Yeah.
Because Sales 101 says that for every 10 people you engage with, one of them is going to become a client. Right. Yeah. That's pretty much it. Right. I mean, it's going to vary from industry to industry and product to product.
It's a good barometer.
It's the rule of thumb, at least. Yeah. Right. And we make adjustments as we see fit, which means that you have to choose 100 ideal clients. Right? If you're choosing 100 ideal clients, you're like, if any one of these 100 are going to be my clients, now you're laser focused. Now you're contacting them. Now you're doing your research on them. You're not the person that's saying, I'm open for business to every single person in the world because I have a website and every single person in the world can access my content. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous, right? People want to be found. They don't want to feel like they are seeking or they're getting lost in the internet jungle that is out there. And, when we create that, that's how we create a scalable business. When you have that, 4 to 10 clients that are building that very top of your pyramid, you create something that eventually becomes, as you're creating it for them, you ask yourself constantly, how do I deliver this so that eventually it can become me or someone else? Yeah. And then as you're building that system, the customized solution for these premium products, you build into the second part of your pyramid, that mid-level offering, which becomes that one to few, right? Or something that is, cookie cutter, right? Boom, 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 boom. You're not paying the same amount, but you're not getting the same amount. You get what you pay for, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. In my top of my funnel, I mean, people are paying me, $25,000 to work with me personally, right? In the bottom of our funnel, we're looking at, kind of $5,000 for a program, right? And then at the very bottom, we do have a bottom of our funnel, but it's actually a networking event, and it's part of the tribe building, which is a little bit different, but it's not a revenue generator. It's our low or no offering, but it helps to build people into the conversation.
Yeah, and it engages them and exposes them to your content and way of doing things, and then there'll be an element of ascension up through that process, wouldn't there?
Absolutely.
No, absolutely great, and I really appreciate that, and I think that when you sort of think of it in that sort of way, it really does sort of crystallize that sort of down. And for us, my own personal, and again, this is slightly different ways. Me, I always have a policy. I never want a client to be more than 20% of my business.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose in my example, because it's going to, the advice that Kim's given is absolutely solid gold. So go and look at your key accounts, go and look at these. And, every business will be different. They're not, this is not tattooed on our arm as final. So in my businesses, if a client ever starts to become more than 20%, well, there's a problem, and, we should have seen that earlier or whatever. And there's too many people out there saying, oh, just keep taking the money, take the money. We talk about stories, Kim, and again, just hijacking the agenda, which I do often in these podcasts, but it's worth for the listeners.
It's your podcast.
Yeah. But I wasn't expecting doing this one, but it just sort of flashes through, and it's value for the audience. I work with a client, and I still work with them. I've worked with them for a good number of years, and I've known the individuals and the exec team for many more years than that. They built up a very successful business. And one client was 85% of the business, and they thought they were safe. They'd got a 3-year contract that scaled up with over 80 employees to deliver that. They'd got long-term commitments to mobile phones, computer equipment, office space, and that customer exercised an early break clause, not because they'd done anything wrong, but their customer got taken over, and then it was a change of policy, and within 90 days, they'd lost that revenue. And that revenue, being totally honest with you, was in excess of £3 million contract, so about $4 million. And it's pretty easy to scale up, guys, but it's not so easy to scale down. You've certainly got a 12-month or cell or mobile phone contract you just can't get out of. You've got company cars you can't get out of. You've got office space you can't get out of. So ultimately, think about it when you're looking, and take this advice that Kim's saying, whether it's 4, whether it's 5, it doesn't really matter. As many as, the spread is nice. You find that balance, but that's absolute solid gold. So, if you're listening on the app, rewind it, go and play this again, this last sort of 2 or 3 minutes of this podcast, and start to work out how you can get spread customer contribution at the higher value and lower that risk as well. Because it's okay chasing the dreams of the higher value client, but obviously you've got to manage that risk as well, because it can really, really hurt you if it goes wrong like that particular client. Then that's true story. There is a positive outcome to that, and you remember the stories. We managed to do a turnaround with them. They're back up there and growing, but they're spreading the risk now, which is a lot better.
Yeah. The grays, the hairs forming, and I mean, this conversation, it does deal with sales, but it was so important outside of the sales conversation. Yeah. That was kind of the first video that I created in that webinar series, because I needed people to spend the time to actually critically think about their business. It's a lot easier for a client to say, I love what they're doing up there and I can't afford it yet. Right. Yeah. Whereas somebody who's buying your free offering or your low price offering, it's like, wow, I love what I'm paying, £100. I wonder what they would get me for £10,000. Nobody's ever said that, right? But they say, I love what they're paying, what they're delivering at £10,000. I wonder when, or what else I can get for less than that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So you mentioned earlier, Kim, a few minutes ago about, getting laser focused and being, what we're calling the ideal persona, avatar, client, whatever analogy that you use globally. I think we use a persona, as our core sort of description. So tell us a little bit more about the importance of getting clear on your ideal persona or client in order to capture the conversation and begin framing the rest of that sales sort of process and direction.
Yeah, well, sales is about delivering specific results to people. And, there's only two times that I want you to get really specific in your sales conversation. The first one is actually the initial bottleneck to determine, is this person actually supposed to be in my giant sales funnel? Yeah. And then the other time I want you to see a bottleneck is right near the end, where we are in proposal and figuring out how to actually deliver, right? That's actually a good bottleneck to have, right? Because then we're actually thinking, okay, we have to hire more people, or we have to, automate some of our systems in order to be able to deliver more. But becoming very specific in the initial conversation allows people to resonate with what the impact that you provide them or their business. For instance, I had a photographer come to me, and he's like, I'm a photographer. And I said, fantastic. What do you take photos of? Oh, I take photos of everything, weddings and landscapes and corporate and blah, 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 blah. And as he's talking, I can't picture what he's doing. Yeah. Right? Or what the value is that he's providing anybody. And oftentimes when we're starting off our business, we're so scared of getting so narrow, thinking, oh, I don't want to limit myself. I don't want to get in too close. But that's actually a good thing, right? Absolutely. Because when you're speaking to one person, right? I'm speaking to you, but I'm speaking to just those around you. I don't need to be casting this giant net. And I talk about this as, lobster traps. And if you've ever seen how they catch lobster, they set these tiny little traps on the bottom of the ocean floor. You would never see somebody go out and throw a giant net across the ocean and say, I'm ideally looking for lobsters, but yeah, I don't want to narrow myself. I don't want to be too focused, because all you would do is you spend a ton of time and energy, and as you pull in that giant ocean net, you're capturing seaweed and a boot and a whale and a bunch of fish that nobody wants, and maybe there's one or two lobsters hanging out in there, but you've wasted yourself, right? When we go in and understand who our ideal client is, the first thing we ask ourselves is, what do they suffer from, or what are the goals that they want to achieve that I know I can help them with, right? Who are they? What size, scope, revenue, how many employees, geography? I mean, don't think that you are limiting yourself by actually sticking with a very specific geography. Proximity has power, right? When you can be face to face in a meeting, when you can pop in, that can actually move you forward. And I'll see people that will have meetings, they'll book themselves. They'll be they'll be talking to somebody on the other side of the country, and the client will be like, yeah, sounds good. And they'll say oh, I happen to be in town 2 days. They don't, right? But getting on that flight and getting in front of that customer has power, right? I mean, there's a reason why I focus on a very, we do online classrooms and I could launch it to everybody in the world. But the reason why we focus on a very narrow geography is because if I need to get on a plane, I want to be able to get on a plane and get back home by dinner time. Right? I want to be able to, that's literally the reason why. If I need to move something forward, I can't do that if I have to fly, overseas. And it's not that I wouldn't take that, but it's, narrow the focus. It's okay to be pulled out, right? But know exactly the lane that you are running in, right? The lane that you are driving in, and stay in that lane and don't veer focus. It's a lot easier and faster to go straight in a line than to be looking at everything outside the window and trying to figure out where you're going at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of points that I'd like to add on that as well, Kim, and just get your view on. We always talk about it that obviously if you can sort of find that perfect persona or narrow it down, and that takes time, start by looking at your ideal best customer, and then interview them and find out why they would work with you and things like that. And then you can maybe fill in the blanks with a couple of others, like a focus group or anything, but it's going to lower your marketing and cost of acquisition costs as well. If you're not going to a specific type of customer, then you're not all the, there's a great saying by John Wanamaker, isn't it? That 50% of my advertising is working, the other 50% isn't. I just don't know which it is. And, that dates back to whatever it is, years, 30s or whatever. But ultimately, if you can get really specific, as Kim's advising you to do, either by location, demographic, geographic, and all the combinations, then you can spend more bang for your buck, if that makes sense, in that area to get those right type of customers. But the other thing, and the major benefit that I like to talk about is if you're doing what I call repeated services to clients that you're exceptionally good at, that they appreciate, then you can scale your business faster and quicker as well. That business becomes easier to operate internally, and you're not talking Chinese to one, and then English to another, and maybe Spanish to a third one. I mean, you're keeping it consistent, and your scalability comes back.
You want to be the person that when your client is looking for you, they know that you're the person that's going to be able to help them. Not that you could be, because we're not really sure, right? It looks like, Mike and his team offer so much to so many people. I don't really know how I would fit in. Whereas Mike's working with exactly the same type of client that I am. So that makes sense, right?
Funny. Yeah. He's one of us, is the thing that I like to. And one thing, a couple of our clients have said to us in the past, Kim, I'm sure you've had the same, because I look at your message and it's so clear, it's awesome. And, where people say, when they make an inquiry and they eventually come on board and, we onboard them and we say, so, let's do a post-sale sort of survey. And they say, Mike, I just thought you were speaking to me. Your message or your video, you just speak to me. As if you've got a camera in my head, what was going on. I'm thinking, well, yeah, we put a lot of time into that. And it's weird that way, because we want to work with what we call the next level people, the people who are ready. And for us, it's people who's maybe gone out there, Kim, and maybe, like you said earlier, done it a little bit less, wasted a bit of money. And, it's not about rubbing the face in and saying you buy cheap, you buy twice. It's not that. But maybe they've gone out there, got it wrong, and then sort of come back to that sort of central sort of position and said, I've got to get it right this time. And we position our messaging that way. So, hey, you know, if you've been there and maybe not, but I don't mind failure because we learn from it, but you've been out and not quite got the result that you want, and then you want to go through a process. And that's the type of people that our net sort of captures, and then it goes from there.
We go for the exact same people. I tell my staff, I'm like, I don't want anybody that is anything less than 6 months of being an entrepreneur. I said, I need them to go out there, get a little bit of road rash, because sales is easy until you actually have to do it. And I'm like, and then once, you know, I said, I want the people that, you know, are at that decision point where, you know, it's like, I either make this work or I go back and get a job.
Yeah. And I don't want to do that.
You know, and that's, for me, that's my ideal client, right? Because it's like, you know, they're in it to win it, right? They're not just, you know, well, let me try my way and see. And if it fails, I'll come back to you. And I'm like, best of luck with that.
We'll see you in 3 months. I mean, not everybody fails, by the way, and everybody gets it right. But, you know, I think what we're saying is that, you know, myself and Kim have got a similar type of audience in different types of parts of the world and sectors. You know, as a tip, you know, go and have a look at it. You know, sit down with your teams. Just say, hey, you know, who are good fits for us? Which of our current clients are great, causes least problems, good margins, pleasure to deal with, we get them results. And it doesn't matter if you're selling low, medium, or high ticket, you can still do that. It doesn't just apply to high ticket stuff. That's certainly a mandatory in high ticket. You really got to be focused with them. So, Kim, the value you provided today is absolutely awesome. And time flies by. I can't believe it. You know, it just flies. So as we start to wrap up on this podcast, you know, if you could give us a sort of a quick summary for those interested in finding more about selling high value B2B services, what would be your top 3 pro tips?
Yeah, I mean, the first one, I mean, you know, we covered everything, right? But I'll just kind of basically summarize everything we talked about, right? Which was, you know, understand who that ideal person is that you want, the business, the person, whatever it is. Feel free to even arbitrarily pick them out of the sky for now, right? You can always refine and pivot, you know, as opposed to feeling like, oh, I don't want to narrow my scope. Create a list of 100 out of those people. Right? I mean, you know, when you know that you are speaking specifically to these people, you're better with your message. You know, now you're not trying to be the jack of all trades and the master of none. You're able to actually deliver a mile deep and an inch wide in the value that you're creating for somebody. People want more depth, not, you know, more width. And then the third one is, you know, just asking better questions. Spend time to ask yourself, what is the intention of the meeting that I want to get out of? And how am I going to ask the questions to get to that end result? Write them down. Ask yourself, you know, what do I need to ask? When you open your notebook up in that meeting and you have all of these listed questions, it doesn't make you look amateur. It makes you look prepared. And hands down, if I ever met with somebody that opened a notebook and said, you know, listen, I have a few questions for you, Kim. Like, can we go through this? I would be blown away. I'd be like, this person has actually taken some time to like really think about what we want to achieve with our time together. My time is valuable. Your time is valuable, because when somebody is sitting down with you that very first time for that hour, right? One of the questions we ask in sales school is, would you charge for your sales meeting, right? Would your client be willing to pay for your sales meeting? And everyone's like, no, I never would. And the follow-up question I ask is, well, aren't they ultimately paying? Because if they're spending an hour with you, what else could they have been doing with that time? Could they have been getting their own clients? Could they have been, you know, doing something else? And so if they're going to gift you with that time, you better make sure that you are well prepared, that you are well engaged, and that you are going to help create something ultimately. So those are my 3. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to get those posted down as well, some tips. So thanks again, Kim. It's been amazing to learn more about, you know, what you do and your perspective on it. It's so true. It rings so, you know, so right for me. I hope the listeners get equally the same amount of value. If you want to learn more about what Kim and the team are doing at KO Advantage, simply visit them online at kimorlesky.com. And again, I highly recommend you check out the webinar series at kimorlesky.com/webinar-series. Again, we will put the link below if you're watching it on the YouTube channel or on the blog.thesuccesshub.io channel there as well. You can check out Kim on LinkedIn as well at linkedin.com/in/Kim Orlesky, or at Twitter at Kim Orlesky. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Kim. Thanks again for sharing your value.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. This has been absolutely great. I want to see more of your listeners, more of your viewers become those sales knockouts, because sales is fun. I love it. I'm passionate about it. And if we're not having fun, why are we doing it?
Why are we doing it? Absolutely. So we'll get all the links mentioned in the show posted when we produce this. So as always, we appreciate the time that you've taken to either watch this or invest in your audio program, whether that's on Apple, iTunes, or Google Play, or Stitcher, or wherever you're listening to this. So we really appreciate you tuning into this episode. And as always, get in the game, go do the hustle, check out Kim's program, then go make it happen, and we'll see you on next week's show.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.